Personality NLP Astrology Case Study for Giri. Since Giri has Moola rising in Sagittarius as his ascendant, he likely moves through the world with a truth-seeking, spiritually rebellious, and emotionally unfiltered presence. Moola, ruled by Ketu and symbolized by roots being pulled from the ground, is a nakshatra of deconstruction. It doesn't chase answers, it digs through illusion to find the core. Sagittarius as a rising sign already brings philosophical curiosity, idealism, and a drive for freedom. But with Moola here, Giri's identity is formed through dismantling beliefs, systems, personas, anything that doesn't feel aligned with truth. This gives him a presence that's both magnetic and intense. Others may perceive him as focused, private, or quietly radical, someone who questions norms not out of defiance, but because his psyche is wired to investigate what lies beneath the surface. From an NLP lens, this ascendant reflects a dissociated and auditory-digital processing style, combined with general chunking. Giri thinks in big patterns, but with detachment. He processes experience by standing back and scanning for underlying principles or fractures in logic. He doesn't just live through things, he watches, dissects, and refines. His attention filter is strongly self-oriented. Giri's choices are filtered through his internal compass. If something doesn't make emotional or philosophical sense to him, he's unlikely to pursue it, no matter how externally validated it may be. This makes him deeply autonomous. He may value input, but rarely lets it override his inner framework. And his motivation direction here is dominantly away from, not out of fear, but from an instinct to avoid falsehood, pretense, or stagnant systems. He instinctively pulls away from anything that compromises his integrity or feels energetically off. Third house, Ketu in Dhanishta, Aquarius. Giri has Ketu placed in Dhanishta in Aquarius, a placement that brings detached insight, rhythmic intelligence, and karmic refinement to how he thinks, speaks, and takes deliberate action. The third house governs communication, self-effort, skill development, curiosity, and one's style of learning. With Ketu here, Giri may have a sharp mind and precise communication style, but also a sense of subtle detachment from it, as if he knows his words matter, but they're not where his identity lives. Dhanishta, ruled by Mars and symbolized by the drum, is a nakshatra of rhythm, structure, and mastery through repetition. In Aquarius, it becomes more innovative, conceptual, and future-oriented. Ketu here blends ancient rhythm with intellectual abstraction. Giri's way of expressing himself may be both precise and minimal, with an uncanny ability to say just enough. He may learn quickly, often absorbing insight beyond what's being taught, and may drop in and out of conversations or interests with strategic timing. From an NLP perspective, this placement reflects a dissociated, auditory-digital style with a preference for general chunking. Giri processes information conceptually, often beyond the literal. He may abstract patterns from what others see as specifics. His mind is tuned more to timing and flow than emotional attachment. He knows when to speak, when to act, and when to disappear from a conversation entirely. Communication for him is a utility, not a performance. His motivation direction here remains away from. He avoids redundant or superficial dialogue, repetitive structures, or noisy environments. Instead, he's drawn to ideas that are distilled, elegant, and quietly powerful. He may prefer nonverbal expression or structured formats like writing, coding, or designing over unfiltered talking. He doesn't need to speak a lot, but when he does, it carries weight. Altogether, Ketu and Dhanishta in the third house gives Giri a psychological signature of intellectual refinement and emotional distance in how he learns, speaks, and acts. He's more interested in rhythm than noise, in essence than expression. His NLP profile in this area reveals someone who thinks in clean structures, communicates with purpose, and walks away from the unnecessary without hesitation. Whether in conversation, skill building, or learning, he's there to uncover, not to impress. Fourth house, Mercury in Revati Pisces. In the fourth house, Giri has Mercury placed in Revati in Pisces, a placement that brings intuitive intelligence, poetic reflection, and emotional fluidity into his inner world, early conditioning, and sense of emotional security. The fourth house governs home, roots, mother, psychological safety, and the feeling of belonging. With Mercury here, Giri's mind is naturally attuned to emotional tone, symbolic meaning, and subtle undercurrents. He likely processes his inner world through dreams, metaphors, and imaginative logic. He thinks through feeling and feels through thought. Revati, ruled by Mercury and symbolized by a pair of fish swimming home, is the last nakshatra, associated with completion, guidance, and emotional refinement. It's spiritual, sensitive, and deeply empathic. With Mercury here, Giri likely grew up internalizing the emotional language of his surroundings. Not just what was said, but how it was said, and what was not said. His inner world may be layered with quiet stories, unspoken memories, and emotional impressions that shape how he thinks and relates from the inside out. From an NLP perspective, Mercury in Revati supports a visual and kinesthetic processing style with specific chunking. Giri likely remembers emotional details vividly, a look, a pause, a tone of voice, and uses that as part of how he navigates personal meaning. He thinks in imagery and emotional cues, perhaps with a storyteller's rhythm. His inner processing is gentle, nonlinear, and highly associative, making him imaginative, perceptive, and deeply reflective in how he evaluates safety, connection, or personal truth. His attention filter here is mostly self-oriented, but subtly porous. While he evaluates emotional spaces from within, he also picks up on others' feelings with a kind of ambient awareness, which can be both a gift and a challenge. He may absorb the moods of his environment without always knowing it, making quiet alone time essential for clarity. His motivation direction in this area leans away from. He instinctively avoids emotionally harsh, chaotic, or overly critical spaces. He seeks and needs peace, subtlety, and emotional coherence to feel grounded. Altogether, Mercury in Revati in the 4th house gives Giri a sensitive, symbolic, and quietly imaginative inner world. He doesn't think in straight lines. He thinks in spirals, sounds, and emotional impressions. His NLP imprint in this area reflects someone who builds internal safety through softness, meaning, and emotional resonance. He's not loud inside, he's listening. And in that inner space, stories, truths, and ideas ripple in layered waves, waiting for the moment they feel safe enough to come to the surface. 5th house, Sun in Ashwini, Aries. In the 5th house, Giri has the Sun placed in Ashwini in Aries, a placement that brings swift intuition, creative spark, and pioneering individuality into his self-expression, intelligence, and instinctive drive for originality. The 5th house governs creativity, learning, emotional confidence, romance, and the way one shines through personal essence. With the Sun here, exalted in Aries, Giri carries a powerful inner light. He doesn't just express himself, he initiates expression. And in Ashwini, that expression is fast, instinctive, and unfiltered, like a flash of knowing that comes before thought. Ashwini, ruled by Ketu and symbolized by twin horsemen, is the nakshatra of beginnings, healing, and immediate activation. It carries the essence of divine speed, the ability to respond to life with purity and momentum. With the Sun here, Giri's creativity is quick, confident, and self-propelled. He likely has a radiant inner child, unafraid to try new things, speak from instinct, or create without overthinking. His sense of self is fueled by the freedom to begin, to act, and to express directly from source. From an NLP perspective, this Sun supports a kinesthetic and visual processing style with a specific chunking orientation. Giri learns by doing. He needs movement, clarity, and engagement to feel alive intellectually and creatively. His ideas may come as flashes, fast, embodied, and image-rich. He likely doesn't respond well to overly slow, theoretical, or abstract environments. He processes through action, physical response, and energetic clarity. His motivation direction here is clearly towards. He is drawn to challenges that let him lead, create, and refine his own voice. He's not waiting to be told he's ready. He moves when the spark strikes. Ashwini doesn't hesitate. But there may also be moments of restlessness or burnout if energy isn't given constructive focus. The key for Giri is rhythm and autonomy. His attention filter is self-oriented, especially in the creative or emotional domains. He expresses from within, not to be liked, but to be true. Praise might feel nice, but it's not his fuel. What matters is whether the expression feels aligned, fresh, and real. He may have a spontaneous, bold quality in love and learning. Not reckless, but fast-moving and internally guided. Altogether, the Sun in Ashwini in the 5th house gives Giri a creative and intellectual signature that is vital, instinctive, and fiercely individual. He doesn't wait to be inspired, he is the inspiration. His NLP imprint in this area shows a doer thinker, someone who processes through movement, learns through action, and expresses through direct, often healing force. He's not here to imitate, he's here to initiate. And what he begins often carries the unmistakable stamp of originality, urgency, and light. Sixth house, Venus in Mrigashira. In the sixth house, Giri has Venus placed in Mrigashira in Taurus, a placement that brings graceful adaptability, aesthetic precision, and a subtle desire for harmony into the domain of service, routine, effort, and conflict navigation. The sixth house governs daily work, discipline, health, interpersonal friction, and how one manages responsibility and imperfection. With Venus here, in its own sign of Taurus, Giri brings an unusual refinement to this terrain. He doesn't just serve, he beautifies service. He may approach daily life as a craft, weaving care and elegance into even mundane tasks. Mrigashira, ruled by Mars and symbolized by the deer's head, is curious, soft, and constantly seeking. It's the nakshatra of exploration, charm, and refined intelligence. In Taurus, this energy becomes sensual, resourceful, and rhythm-driven. With Venus here, Giri likely has a highly attuned sense of balance in his work environment. He notices texture, pacing, tone, and subtle aesthetic cues that others overlook. He may prefer calm, beautiful, or stable routines, and can be quietly exacting about the emotional or sensory tone of his daily life. From an NLP perspective, Venus in Mrigashira supports a visual and kinesthetic processing style, with a specific chunking orientation. Giri filters effort through the body. He needs to feel right in his space, in his schedule, and in his habits. He processes visually as well, responding to design, structure, beauty, and tone in how work is done. He may learn tasks best by observing and then customizing, refining as he goes. Routine, for him, must include variation and sensual coherence, or it begins to feel stifling. His motivation direction in this area is largely toward balance, physical well-being, beauty in motion, and relational ease in collaborative environments. But Mrigashira's restless edge can create an away from undertone too. He instinctively avoids rigid systems, harsh authority, or emotionally abrasive routines. He's not built for brute force, he's built for finesse. Even in conflict, Giri likely prefers subtle redirection or gentle distancing over open confrontation. His attention filter is a blend of others' awareness and self-orientation. He's attuned to others' emotional and physical comfort, especially in shared workspaces or service roles, but he ultimately checks in with his own sensory and emotional boundaries before committing. He may carry a quiet code of integrity in how he serves or contributes, doing things not just correctly, but beautifully. Altogether, Venus in Mrigashira in the sixth house gives Giri a work ethic that is subtle, responsive, and sensually intelligent. He brings ease into effort, gentleness into structure, and grace into routine. His NLP drives here reflect someone who filters action through texture and tone, someone who refines through rhythm and evaluates success not just by what's done, but how it's done. He's not here to grind, he's here to elevate. Even in the smallest acts of service, Giri carries a kind of artistry. Eighth house, Moon in Ashlesha. In the eighth house, Giri has the moon placed in Ashlesha in Cancer, a placement that brings profound emotional intelligence, psychic depth, and psychological complexity into the realm of transformation, intimacy, vulnerability, and hidden power. The eighth house governs shared energy, emotional entanglement, inner metamorphosis, and the ability to endure and emerge from life's most intense transitions. With the moon here, in its own sign of Cancer, Giri is deeply sensitive to emotional undercurrents, but with Ashlesha's influence, this sensitivity is layered with precision, subtle control, and almost serpentine discernment. Ashlesha, ruled by Mercury and symbolized by the coiled serpent, is a nakshatra of binding, insight, and emotional strategy. It understands emotional complexity like few others, reading energy, tracking unspoken motives, and operating in spaces where others may feel lost or overwhelmed. With the moon here, Giri's emotional body is attuned to the psychological patterns beneath the surface. He may not always show what he feels, but he always feels. He likely carries deep emotional memory, complex attachments, and a gift for penetrating emotional truths, even or especially when they're hidden. From an NLP lens, the moon in Ashlesha reflects a kinesthetic and auditory-digital processing style with specific chunking. Giri tracks emotional information in fine detail: body language, vocal inflection, the emotional residue left after a conversation. His processing is layered and internalized. He may not express feelings immediately, but they are felt and filed with exacting emotional logic. He often needs privacy to metabolize emotional experience, especially intense or vulnerable dynamics. His motivation direction here leans away from, particularly when emotional chaos, betrayal, or unconscious entanglement are present. He instinctively distances from what feels energetically invasive or emotionally dishonest, not out of fear, but as a preservation of psychic clarity. However, his towards drive activates in emotionally rich, spiritually safe spaces. He's drawn to deep emotional truth, soul-level bonding, and conversations that explore the unseen or unspoken. His attention filter is deeply self-oriented, though keenly attuned to others' energy. He doesn't just feel his emotions, he feels the emotional atmospheres around him. In intimate settings, this can make him incredibly empathetic, but also selective. He senses when something is off long before it's spoken. He may choose to reveal very little, even while observing everything. Altogether, the moon in Ashlesha in the 8th house gives Giri an emotional and psychic landscape that is rich, sensitive, and transformative. His inner world is layered with memory, insight, and quiet intensity, and his NLP blueprint here reflects someone who processes emotion like a psychic surgeon, feeling everything, revealing little, and moving through the depths with both care and clarity. He's not here for emotional noise, he's here for emotional alchemy. And in his presence, others may feel both seen and carefully held, not by what he says, but by what he silently understands. 9th house, Saturn in Uttara Falguni, Jupiter, Mars, and Rahu in Magha, all in Leo. In the 9th house, Giri has a powerful cluster of planets, Saturn in Uttara Falguni, and Jupiter, Mars, and Rahu in Magha, all in Leo, shaping his belief systems, spiritual worldview, philosophical frameworks, and approach to learning and higher purpose. The 9th house governs truth, dharma, long-distance journeys, teachings, and moral compass. With 4 planets here, Giri's orientation toward truth is deeply karmic, intensely personal, and layered with both discipline and fire. He's not here to borrow beliefs. He's here to embody them, challenge them, and ultimately author his own. Saturn in Uttara Falguni brings structure and long-term accountability to Giri's search for truth. Uttara Falguni, ruled by the sun and symbolized by the marriage bed, is about commitment, refinement, and steady integration. Saturn here suggests that Giri builds his spiritual or philosophical foundation slowly, deliberately, and with a high bar for authenticity. He may have been skeptical early in life or challenged by traditional teachings, but over time, his beliefs become distilled, hard-earned, and tested. He seeks wisdom that lasts. From an NLP perspective, Saturn here reflects a dissociated and auditory-digital style with a preference for general chunking. Giri likely processes spiritual or philosophical content abstractly, applying structure and order to big-picture thinking. He filters teachings through inner alignment, not dogma. His motivation direction here is away from. He instinctively rejects superficial belief systems or hollow ideologies, only allowing in what withstands emotional and intellectual scrutiny. Jupiter, Mars, and Rahu in Magha amplify this space with charisma, willpower, and ancestral fire. Magha, ruled by Ketu and symbolized by the royal throne, is the nakshatra of legacy, authority, and karmic inheritance. It deals with power, memory, and spiritual lineage. With Jupiter here, Giri's wisdom is ancient and proud. He may resonate with Vedic, ancestral, or classical systems, even if he applies them in modern ways. His moral compass is internally sovereign. He doesn't need external validation to know what's true. Jupiter in Magha reflects a visual and auditory digital processing style with general chunking. Giri sees belief systems as architecture, designed, shaped, and preserved. He likely honors the lineage of teachers, but isn't bound by them. His motivation direction is clearly toward knowledge, meaning, and ethical leadership. Mars in Magha adds intensity, ambition, and assertive conviction to his worldview. He may defend his beliefs with pride and is quick to challenge anything that undermines truth or authority. Mars here reflects a kinesthetic and specific chunking style. Giri responds instinctively, especially when something feels misaligned with his sense of honor. He doesn't just hold beliefs, he acts on them. Rahu in Magha introduces karmic hunger, a drive to define himself through spiritual authority, perhaps through teaching, leadership, or confronting inherited dogma. Rahu magnifies this house's importance in his life. He's here to reclaim or reconstruct personal dharma, to be a voice of vision, even if it puts him at odds with convention. From an NLP perspective, Rahu here reinforces auditory-digital and mismatching tendencies. Giri may question, invert, or rebuild paradigms, never content with surface-level answers. Together, these placements give Giri a ninth house imprint of commanding spiritual individuality. He processes truth through architecture, legacy, and deeply internal conviction. His NLP blueprint here reflects someone who thinks in ethical systems, acts with philosophical urgency, and filters wisdom through both discipline and fire. He's not here to follow the path, he's here to reforge it. And in doing so, he redefines what spiritual authority can look like. Sovereign, principled, and quietly unstoppable. Overall NLP drives for Giri. Giri's NLP profile reveals a deeply internal, visionary, and emotionally refined mind, one that filters reality through symbolic resonance, somatic clarity, and uncompromising discernment. With powerful planetary placements in Moola, Dhanishta, Revati, Ashwini, Ashlesha, Magha, and Uttara Falguni, spanning fire, air, water, and earth, his cognitive system is multidimensional. He moves through life like an intuitive architect, observing, dissecting, embodying, and reassembling truth from within. His dominant processing styles are auditory-digital, kinesthetic, and visual. Auditory-digital shows up in his philosophical and psychological structure, especially through Moola rising, detachment, Mercury and Revati, symbolic synthesis, and Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn in the ninth, truth as principle. He reflects constantly, often turning over meaning in silence, mapping mental blueprints internally before sharing externally. His kinesthetic edge, seen in the moon in Ashlesha, Venus in Mrigashira, and Mars in Magha, shows how deeply he senses the texture of interactions and environments. He feels his way into decisions and expressions. Visual processing complements this with sharp pattern recognition, poetic imagery, and aesthetic sensitivity, particularly in emotional or work-related contexts. His chunk size varies by context, but leans towards specific in communication, work, and emotional detail, and general in philosophy, learning, and purpose. In expression, third house Ketu in Dhanishta, intimacy, moon in Ashlesha, Venus in Mrigashira, Giri breaks things down into minute detail, watching tone, structure, and emotional undercurrent. But in the spiritual, ethical, and creative domains, Sun in Ashwini, ninth house stellium, he expands outward, seeking universal themes, principles, and archetypes that anchor long-term meaning. His motivation direction is a layered balance of towards and away from. He moves towards purpose, integrity, mastery, and emotional truth, compelled by vision and energetic clarity. But he's equally quick to move away from emotional entanglement, chaotic systems, or energetic incoherence. His boundaries aren't always visible, but they are strong, and governed by a refined instinct for when something is clean and when it's not. Moola, Ashlesha, and Saturn placements make him allergic to pretense. His attention filter is primarily self-oriented, but highly perceptive of others. He processes through inner alignment. Others' input is noted, but only absorbed if it resonates inwardly. This gives him a quiet independence. Even in relationship or collaboration, he filters through his own timing, values, and meaning. Still, with Ashlesha Moon and Mrigashira Venus, he is attuned to the emotional textures of others, noticing far more than he reveals. His action style blends reactive inner timing with precise outer decisiveness. He reflects deeply, especially when something touches his emotional or philosophical core, but once his internal circuit clicks into clarity, his action is swift and unapologetic. Ashwini Sun and Magha Mars lend him the ability to initiate boldly, especially when aligned with purpose. Ketu's placements make him elusive. He'll move fast or withdraw completely depending on inner cues. Giri likely thrives in environments that allow for deep thinking, emotional autonomy, philosophical conversation, and a rhythm that honors solitude as much as connection. He struggles in noisy, shallow, or emotionally dishonest spaces. He does best where he can refine, deepen, and lead with subtle clarity. where he's allowed to listen before speaking and to move only when it feels true. Altogether, Giri's NLP drives paint the portrait of a philosopher practitioner, someone who thinks symbolically, feels precisely, and acts with energetic fidelity. He isn't trying to be understood, he's trying to be true. And through that quiet calibration, he brings a rare blend of insight, depth, and impeccability into everything he touches.